Hi guys, it's Stephanie Grams with SewingWithSteamLLC.com, and if I spoke too fast, you can always find my information in the description underneath. So this is part 2, so I'll say part 2 of this sew along or stitch along. The idea was to use the scrap fabrics that we have laying around and using printed fabric for the background. In part 1, we did the French knots and a chain stitch here. And now we are going to continue on with the stitching here. Be sure to like and subscribe. I'd love to have you share if you are enjoying the stitch along or any of the content on my sewing channel. If you have any questions, just post a comment below, and as long as I see the question, I will be sure to answer it. I'll try not to bump the camera too much. So basically I'm just doing a chain stitch for the antennas of this butterfly. In part 1, I spoke about adding another design, so I went ahead and just used freehand drawing to design that at the bottom. Some people get really quick and fancy with their stitches. Let me see if I can do that with this here. Up and under, you can go over and under, whatever is most comfortable for you. Hopefully you're able to see how I'm making the chain stitch. You come up through the other stitch without getting caught on your stand. There we go. I think at this point we're on day 8 of the COVID-19 quarantine here in Ohio. And we're just all trying to do the best we can with making do with what we have, I think, for the most part. Trying to keep a positive attitude, enjoying the time that I have with my family. I just trying to be positive, and basically I just trust the Lord. I need to move this out of the way. I'm not sure if you've visited my website before or if you've watched any of the videos in my playlist, but I've been sewing since about 7 years old. My grandma taught me, and then I followed suit with watching my mom. My mom was a very good sewist, pattern designer. She made most of the clothes for my sisters and I. I'm pretty sure she made some for my brothers too. And I watched my mom and grandma sew and create their own clothing. They used to use brown paper grocery bags for the patterns, to draw the patterns and cut them out. And I would hide underneath the dining room table because they used to use the dining room table for their sewing. So I would hang out underneath, also known as being underfoot. They were very patient with me and kind, and I'm so thankful that they took the initiative to invite me into their little world of sewing to teach me what it is now that I'm showing you. I think as a parent, because I have 4 daughters, 4 living daughters, that when you see your child basically underfoot, and if you're a hobbyist, it doesn't matter, painting, building, something that you as a parent have taken a liking to, and then all of a sudden your child is showing an interest by getting underfoot or asking a bunch of questions, it's time to teach them. Obviously, depending on what it is you do, you would want to always keep safety in mind. When I was being taught how to sew, they gave me a blunt end needle and with a larger eye, and I had the scrap fabrics, and then I had I think it was like child safety scissors, to be honest with you. And then obviously as my hands became more steady, I graduated from the child safety items to the sharper items and things like that. Now that was a big leap for me, and I can remember poking my finger quite often and it bleeding and things like that. I mean, that's how you learn. You just learn by watching, listening, and then obviously practicing, putting it into action. So, sorry. I try not to bump the camera. Right now, I'm not sure. Here you go. This is what the back looks. There's some big loops. That's how it happens sometimes. And let me cut this right here. All right. So the butterfly is now complete. Let me put my little light here. This is the butterfly. So we have some French knots and then a chain stitch here, chain stitch there. And in case you didn't see part 1, I have a magnet up here, and that's just like a needle minder. It just holds onto my needle while I'm stitching. So I have a little bitty tiny light like this. It's just a tiny light that I found at the Dollar Tree. Comes in handy. Now let's move the stitch a little bit. Here's the bottom, and I am going to do a flower here. Now I'm only going to do probably half of this because the very part 1 I talked about the chain stitch. So this is going to be another chain stitch like we did for the outline of the butterfly, but also what I just showed you on camera with the antennas. I'm going to show you this flower here, and then I'm going to repeat this same flower here and here, and then this is going to be a chain stitch. Now I'm not going to show you all of that on camera because I don't want part 2 to be as long as part 1. So we will go ahead and get this started. Let me just knot this real quick. So I hope all of you are doing well. Let me just show you what I'm doing. I'm just knotting this, okay? All right, let's get this camera figured out. My light, again, the background is a lime green. It's very spring-like. I am going to put a few French knots in the middle of this flower. You can do any design you would like. to come up and do a loop here. And this will make sense in a minute. Don't pull these loops too tight. If you're going to follow what I'm doing, don't pull these loops too awfully tight. You want your needle to get back underneath. And I'll show you here in just a minute. This is almost like a starfish, but you can choose any colors you prefer. Okay, I'm going to tie this off because I am done with this one. When you tie this off, try not to pull too tightly. You do want to make a knot, but you don't want to pull so tight that it pulls the front out. All right, or we will save this for later. Okay. Nope, not purple. I might make this one. Actually, I like the pink and silver together. We'll do pink. This was my little tip from earlier. There, put this paper bobbin on here and unwind. Works for me. Alright, just move this out of the way. Now if you pre-choose your design and your embroidery colors, you can always pre-thread the needles. That way you don't have to change them in and out. And again, I'm just doing a basic knot. I don't do anything fancy. All right. I'm coming up through here. I'm going underneath. I'm going back down by the French knots where I came in, but not in the same hole, so to speak. Let me see if I can. All right, so right here's where the needle is going to come up. I'm taking the needle through the loop I made with the silver floss, taking it around, and I'm going back down. I'm going to do the same thing here. It's similar to the Lazy Daisy stitch, I suppose, but I'm using two different colors of embroidery floss instead of using the exact same color. So, I mean, you can still do that if you would like to do that. I kind of like the dimensional look of this. Oops, I got a knot. Might want to be careful about that. You don't want to pull your French knots through. Again, you'll find the loop, go down, and then I am actually going to go back up next to the French knots. And I'm just going to continue until I get the thickness of this flower petal to my liking. You can just leave it a single if you'd like to. You don't have to go back through, but I prefer to do that. I can't remember where I learned this type of stitch. I know it's been over 10 years ago that I learned this stitch, but I don't know I just couldn't tell you where I saw it or was first introduced. I may have just saw it on a finished product and then figured it out myself. Again, you can just continue to do this if you want to. I'm gonna